Welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Dean. I like to cycle people through here who are much better than me at this, and my guest today is definitely in that category. Please welcome to the show. He is a political assassin. He has run some of the biggest presidential and governor campaigns. Also, really responsible for the pushback with the Lincoln Project. Now he's got his own Substack. It is called The Warning. And please welcome Mr. Steve Schmidt, ladies and gentlemen. Steve, we almost went to a baseball game the other day, but one lost phone later. I missed you, so we're gonna have to do that again.
I did. We have a rain check going on.
Yeah, I'd like that. I know you
I
went
have,
to a,
I have. In the end, officially, I didn't lose the phone, Dean. It was misplaced. I have
oh,
recovered the phone, but not the ticket. So we'll have to do this. But I did see two Blue Jays games last two nights against the Yankees. Two big wins. Blue Jays in first place in the AL East.
yeah. Who'd have thunk it, right? I mean, no one expected much. I know you're a big baseball guy, and you being a Canadian, an honorary Canadian at this point, and being a Toronto guy, you got to admit, you probably didn't see this coming if you followed what the Jays didn't do in the offseason, which they threaten to do every year, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've said all year, just going back, watching games, I was like, Blue Jays are pretty good. Blue Jays are pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah, through April, through May, Blue Jays are definitely good. They're
yeah,
good.
they're
They're
hanging in
good.
there. Anyway, dude, great to see you. I know we've got lots to get to today, and you've been doing some stunning work with Ryan Lizza. Watched your podcast the other day, or your Substack live the other day, and it dawned on me that in the mess that is the new United States of America, or not so United States of America, that the surveillance and funding for surveillance in a police state has gone largely unreported unless you're talking to or listening to people like yourself. And I just put out a post about it because all the pieces are coming together, of Project 2025, the big, beautiful bill, what it means, of course, Trump deporting, arresting, detaining people. But you called it something the other day in your Substack Live with Ryan that I thought was fascinating, you and Judge Luddick, that this is the most egregious legislation. This is the most disgusting legislation ever perpetrated on the American people. And it looks like it's going to pass today, Steve.
In 250 years, right? There are there is legislation, there was legislation around the sale of human beings uh, during slavery and the antebellum era that are more evil. But there's never been a bigger swindle. There has never been somebody who said, vote for me. I'm running to make the country great again. And who talked to people, and I could go on for hours, days, as long as you could tolerate, and then I would not only be just getting started, right? I wouldn't even be at the beginning of it yet, right? Of the cost of the abandonment of the Democratic Party through the industrial Midwest, through the Mountain West, the South, the fact that it's a regional party, that people who feel condescended, abandoned to, forgotten. I can take you down to the FDR Memorial. All of the quotes are about forgotten people. Right? If you understand FDR's career, and I know you do, it's about that everybody has purpose and worth, and everybody has to be seen. Everybody has to be heard. And Donald Trump heard these people, heard their pain, capitalized on it. It has betrayed them in a staggering manner. There is a key to unlocking something powerful that we learned from this bill, which again, without precedent in its awfulness. But one of the awfuls did not make it through. And that is something that we should understand and appreciate where and why and how. And that is the 132 million acre public land sell off orchestrated by Mike Lee. And a coalition came together. The Save America movement, which is in its infancy, played a role in that effort. One of the leaders of the Save America movement, Ryan Busey in Montana. That coalition included Bishop Barber, and it included gentlemen featured in New York Times story who were Trump voters who say, I didn't vote for this because everyone in America owns that land equally. And it got knocked out of the provision. And it shows you the contours and the boundary lines of where that pushback can be. But it's not enough to protect the 16 million people that will be thrown off of insurance. The budget in its totality is an act of generational theft, $4 trillion in debt. I always say this during these to explain what a trillion is. If I say I'll see you in a million seconds, it's in 12 days. I say I see you in a billion seconds, it's in 33 years. A trillion seconds is 33,000 years. That's the difference between a billion and a trillion. And so this is $4 trillion in debt. It's a shattering piece of theft. But as bad as all of that is, as terrible as all of the things are, the thing that we will be most discussing is the thing that was least discussed about it. And I would argue is something that Trump is fully aware of and appreciates the diversion of all of the other issues because he doesn't care about health care. He doesn't care who's covered and who's not and who gets treated for cancer or who doesn't. What he does care about is getting his hands on a giant police state apparatus, which is what this bill delivered. And so ICE has become the largest law enforcement agency in the history of the United States, larger than the KGB. There is legislation that comes from Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee that would make it illegal to unmask a masked ICE agent, thus validating the formation of a secret police and imprisoning anyone for 5 years who said, no, these people work for us in a government of the people, by the people, for the people, as opposed to that they enjoy some protected class and status as oppressors. And so the budget for Homeland Security, for the deportations and ICE ranges somewhere on the low end of what the Israeli military budget is. And I think we all can appreciate that's a highly capable military. And on the upward end, it is somewhere around the French, Ukraine military budgets. And France is a nuclear power with nuclear submarines and aircraft carrier and expeditionary capabilities. And so we have militarized, faceless, maskless thugs, called them federal agents, and given them military hardware and a military budget and barely talked about it in public debate. And that's a big component of this bill as well. And that's a very frightening thing.
Just to kind of go through the numbers as you've explained, and by the way, that's more than the Marine Corps as well, 160 billion. If that is the upper end of that budget, that is more than the Marine Corps gets on a yearly basis. Just so you know, 100 billion for detention, deportation, surveillance for 2029, 29.9 billion for logistics and transportation of migrants or anybody else that they choose to kidnap, apprehend, or disappear.
Let me just interrupt you. With that's with a B.
Yeah.
US dollars, $30 billion for transportation. And really at a functional level, right? This is important because Adolf Eichmann, at some level, really didn't have an appreciation why he was sitting in the dock in Jerusalem. Because according to Adolf Eichmann, he was in the logistics and transportation business. So
Mm.
keep an eye on the transportation budget in this, because that's a place where a lot of abuses happen.
Mm. Yeah, well said, right? I mean, who gets tagged in and who gets to profit from this? Well said. 45 billion to expand ICE's detention facilities to hold a staggering 100,000 people per day. 14 billion for targeted deportation operations. $10,000 hiring bonus for 10,000 new ICE officers, sir.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
Look up the cost. It seems like you can look up things really fast. Look up look up the cost of the new Raiders stadium in Las Vegas. Like, what did that cost? Like a
I
billion,
want to say it was a billion and a half. Yeah.
billion, billion and a half?
Tom Brady acquiring 200. No, yeah, billion and a half, billion and a
Billion
half for the
and
new
a
Raiders
half
stadium.
for like the you look at a stadium, you look at the one in LA, you kind of look at these stadiums, you're like, wow, holy shit. That's really cool looking. And that's a billion and a half. We're gonna spend 45 billion dollars. The air traffic control system is falling apart. Infrastructure of the country is falling apart. There are parts of the country that don't have broadband. You just spent $45 billion building a vast American gulag archipelago, and the American dockout, calling it Alcatraz, is an insult to Alcatraz, which is a federal penitentiary, not a concentration camp. This is a concentration camp. There's a difference between a prison and a concentration camp. While concentration camps are prisons, not all prisons are concentration camps. This is a concentration camp like Seacot in El Salvador that meets every definition of what a concentration camp is. And so one of the sickest members of Congress, Nancy Mace, immediately says, hey, if you guys have Dachau in the Everglades, we want to have Bergen-Belsen up here in South Carolina because we have alligators too.
Yeah.
And you see the question that Trump is asked, and the question is, well, is the point about the snakes and the alligators is that these people would be eaten by the alligator? And he's like, yeah, 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 yeah. He jokes around and he makes his thing.
They got to run. They got to weave when they run.
I wrote about this yesterday. If they are invaders, the scum of the earth, the most dangerous terrorists in the world, why not just kill these people? Right? Why not just kill them? And so, where is the line, right? How far the journey from where we were 10 years ago to this moment where the president is unveiling with glee in his eyes, standing next to the gleamy-eyed zealots like Kristi Noem and Ron DeSantis' concentration camp? How far from point A to B to there, from there to killing these people? Because there's some lessons in history that start to enter into the equation. Now, right, maybe the question to Stephen Miller is that, would you like to kill them? Do you wish you could kill them? Do you think the world would be better off if they were all dead? Is what you're worried about the impact psychologically on the ICE stormtroopers who would have to shoot them? Right, because that was the rationale for the use of Zyklon B by the Nazis in Auschwitz. It was a humane act. Right, at Treblinka, you had a system of madness. They murdered 900,000 people in the open air. Right, we're using the exhaust of a tank engine. All the possessions were stripped. People who did the murdering went insane. So by the time you get to the innovation on the killing at Auschwitz, you march 900 Soviet prisoners and the Zyklon B works perfectly. Easy peasy. And so once you cross the line that these aren't humans, these aren't people, they don't deserve rights, you fetishize their cruelty, you fetishize their mistreatment. The United States has already crossed a fundamental moral line. We have a deal, and in our idiotized society, right? I don't know how to explain this any more simply. My government, the American government, sells human beings like Abrego Garcia to El Salvador for a price without due process. Now, I have no idea what Abrego Garcia did or didn't do. Just because someone got deported, Democrats should have the political wisdom to appreciate doesn't make them George Washington.
Hmm.
I just know whatever he did, I'm not convinced by the accusation made against him by Kristi Noem or Stephen Miller. And if a judge says do it, the government must do it. And so at any rate, we sell these people into incarceration, into torture with the deliberate knowledge that that would happen in our name while this police state has come together. So, 10 years from now, what did Donald Trump accomplish in his first 6 months? Right? Does anybody believe that the lead paragraph will be he stripped 16 million people from their health insurance? Lead paragraph will be in 6 months' time, he destroyed the American justice system, eradicated the checks and balances. The republic fell at a functional level, and he erected a giant surveillance state, a giant police state. He accumulated the data of the American people in all of its disparate places, combined it into a single file, and created the most sophisticated surveillance state since the Stasi's ran East Germany in 6 months' time.
Isn't that exactly what we're talking about? We started talking about what this big, beautiful bill really meant, when it came to Americans and their healthcare, when it came to taxes, when it came to the wealth transfer from the middle class and the poorest to the marginalized to the richest. But to me, it was the least most talked about, which you so eloquently, once again, Steve. Not many people can do it like you. Have gone from A to B, but been able to connect all the minutia and the dots between the two. But isn't that the point and purpose? Isn't that what Donald Trump loved the most about Kim Jong Un? Isn't this what he loved the most about Vladimir Putin? Is that Vladimir Putin, much like in the Franco War, much like every dictator, has somehow empowered the worst people in that country, some of the worst goons in that country. You can talk about the rumors of former J6ers and Proud Boys and other militia members joining the ranks of ICE, being deputized, untrained assholes just run around kidnapping people. But wasn't the whole point the establishment of a permanent police state? And for lack of a better term, an American Gestapo? Isn't this what Trump really wanted this time around?
He's got it. And it was delivered to him, despite the plain history of the country and it being antithetical to the values of the country. And nobody, generally speaking, much comprehends what it is they're about to see, and people won't like it very much. When what is happening in Los Angeles comes to your town square. And so he will have assembled a militarized secret police force that will antagonize the population of the country and thus then be his rationale to demand more control. And the numbers are staggering. Staggering. And it's an act of theft. Greatest transfer of wealth in American history. One of the criticisms I've always had of Democrats during my years as a Republican, consultant, and I've always thought that they fell short in their imaginations and being able to appeal, to the American taxpayer. But I pay a lot of taxes. I've paid about half of what I've made in my career. I don't feel like I've been undertaxed at all. I don't think that if you work in financial services that you should pay a totally lower tax rate that's 300% lower than if an electrician has a successful business, if I have a successful business, if you have a successful business, if you were an American, right? I think it's fundamentally right. I think it's fundamentally wrong, right? But I believe in progressive taxation. I agree with the principle, right? The more you make, the more you should pay,
Mhm.
right? You don't put the burden of the society on the least fortunate. You put it on the most fortunate, right? And that concept of fairness, nobody likes paying taxes. Everyone wants to pay a dollar less here. But the giveaways on the back of the middle class and the displacement of cost onto the backs of just the prosperous class, right? It's above the middle class for the billionaires is astonishing. I'll sit around with my friends, I get a dinner over a drink and, the guys who have the Republican disposition on the health care and the socialism on the health care. And, what I try to explain to them is it's like a balloon and there's air in the balloon. And if the kid breaks his leg and he doesn't have insurance, who pays for the broken leg? And who pays for the insurance if the kid can't afford the insurance? And the answer is to these guys is always the same, which is you do and I do. And that's just the way it fucking works. The scam is that Trump is telling these guys that they don't have to pay for that anymore, but they do have to pay for it because every burden of cost that's sloughed off on an accounting gimmick or by a service that's actually denied, the need gets picked up by someone somewhere at a cost that's usually greater. The cheapest dollar you can spend is the one that keeps the child from becoming hungry and falling in a bad way and becoming a criminal, like the song In the Ghetto, the Elvis lyrics, right? Versus the cost of incarceration. So this bill is the most costly bill in American history, evaluated like a diamond, fragmenting and fracturing light and projecting it onto a wall with 1,000 points all refracting, right? Each point of refracting light there is an historic example of this being the greatest example of taking, the greatest upward transfer of wealth, the most corrupt act. It is outlandish, but the most transformative piece of this bill, and when you look at it historically, the theft is a feature. The corruption is a feature of it. but it will be remembered as a piece of transformation legislation that has few peers. And in the last 80 years, the peers, right, on par with how it's going to transform the society or the GI Bill, the Interstate Highway Act, the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. And this is not the rescission of health care, terrible though that may be. This is the creation of the American Gulag system, a network of concentration camps, a militarized mass federal police agency, and a secret police force. That's this. And
Go ahead.
Democrats have one election
Mhm.
to get control of this Senate and this House and put a check on this guy.
Do you expect, and a lot of
One
people are
election.
getting, yeah, please. And I want to kind of expand on that briefly too, because I know you got to run. Really appreciate you doing this, Steve, as always. Steve Schmidt from the Warning. Okay. All right, buddy. All right. I appreciate you. Go and subscribe to The Warning, everybody. He is easily one of the best pundits, commenters, and commentators when it comes to breaking all of this down. But, back to the police state bit, again, this is not something that they ran on, right? This is not something, and I know there's a lot of depressed people here. But being able to project that out, what would you tell? And I mean, you don't need to be dramatic because this is as dramatic a subject as it gets. But what do you project out in terms of what America looks like if the House doesn't go back to the Democrats, the Senate doesn't go back to the Dems in the midterms? Because a lot of people are talking about how he's going to take this well-funded goon squad and do things that you mentioned when we were kind of breaking it out at the start of the actual Substack Live, where they're going to create chaos, enough chaos to where maybe a guy like Donald Trump might declare martial law, no voting, no elections, forget it, it's over, this is wartime. Because his whole thing is he treats everything like it's a national security threat, and then he jams through some national security policy that's an executive order that's national security. This is about the future of America, and then that is me. But project that out for me, because if the Democrats don't take the House in the midterms, I mean, does America run the risk of never having another free and fair election again?
I mean, it's not in the DNA in the country not to have one. So if you just in this moment objectively, right? You and I share in common, right? Which should be shared by everybody, but is not. Is that we objectively can assess the situation realistically and say this has happened. This is what's happened.
Yeah.
Right. So there's nothing we said at all on this call that I think I gotta back up and argue with anyone on about that's a description fairly about what's happening. Right? No high that's what's happening. So so the next part of that, right, that you gotta start looking into and you have to start thinking about is so if that's happening, what happens next? Right? And the what happens next question is deeply linked to if we're sitting around and we're trying to figure that out, right? We're going to get to this question very quickly. Do the people like this? Or do they not? And the American people don't like this. They don't like anything he's doing. His numbers are falling. And I can show you a real world example like Tom Tillis. All of the polling is going down and collapsing, but Trump's strongest point still remains his handling of immigration. So your average Democratic Washington, D.C. lame-o consultant who's a loser and incompetent, will say, oh, we can't attack at the strongest position. Culturally, the Republican consultant appreciates you go for the throat. You go for the vital organ. You go for the strongest point in the line. And that's where this is, the immigration fight. Because in the substance, right, that is at the core of what Trump has done in 6 months' time that's most transformative. And so he will start to use this instrument. And if he uses it in certain ways, he will provoke violence. And his goal is to provoke violence with the use of police force, state force, to declare the necessity of declaring powers to use the force to quell all dissent. And if he does those things, then there will be violence in a society that moves into a space of the unimaginable. Neighbor on neighbor, brother against brother. The country, when it was a population of 34 million, had a civil war that killed 800,000 people. That was fundamentally about freedom and was a war that was imposed on the country by an extremist authoritarian faction that is the antecedent to this new confederacy that has arisen. And so all of that is frightening, and none of that is necessary to contemplate because these next two elections determine the future of the country. Mm. And Donald Trump will try to frighten people. He will try to say there'll be no election. People will say he'll try to do things that there won't be an election, but there will be an election. Mm. Election will be controlled by the states, by the local jurisdictions. The American people will vote, and the American people have to repudiate this, or they will be swallowed up by it. And so the American people will vote. And if Donald Trump, and for those who say, no, the American people won't vote, then there will be war in the United States.
Yeah.
And so the American people will vote.
You know, there are very few sobering moments that I have anymore because, you know, we live in this world of chaos. You continually provide these sobering moments, and I don't disagree. I think it's something that you can see starting to really bubble. You can start to see the will of the people as this regime, the Trump regime, just continues to enact inhumanity against 365 million individuals who are just getting ready to live. You know, I look around and I listen to the stories. A Canadian man died in custody, 49-year-old Johnny Noviello. There's 55 more Canadians in ICE detention facilities right now. Canada's frantically trying to figure that out. You know, and I know that diplomatically we're trying to put our best foot forward. But, you know, watching Tom Homan the other day say, yeah, people die in custody, you know, not only underscored the inhumanity, but it also got me thinking and doing some research on what is a crime against humanity in the United States. And is this what we're seeing right now? Because you, as a historian, someone who understands, you know, how we found out about concentration camps in 1945 when the Allies rolled through Europe, liberating all of these different work camps, death camps, Nazi concentration camps, they were shocked by it. They did not know abuses to this level were being visited on human beings across Europe on behalf of the Nazi regime. And I said this in a post the other day. I'm like, no, I don't think we're ever going to find out about the human rights abuses, the torture, some of the death. You know, this is a regime that lies like it breathes. Is this not something that the International Criminal Court, other countries are looking at as he erects these concentration camps, as we see people getting kidnapped? Is there any outside help for America? And do you think anything that you've seen kind of rises to that occasion?
Well, I do think so. For example, if you look at the Abrego Garcia case and you look at the likelihood that American officials knew that transferees would be abused there and understood that the abused transferee was being sold there, that there are all manner of statutes under international human rights law, under international human rights conventions, and under human rights treaties that the United States is a signatory to that would make the people involved in that stuff to be very, very vulnerable. I at the core of your question is this. I believe everything that everybody has done will be known. We will know every detail. There are no secrets. And there are some of these places I can tell you right now will be national park sites in 50 years with rangers interpreting the abuses that went on there. My side will prevail in this fight. It will prevail. We will win. I have no doubt about that. But there will be terrible, terrible things that happen. The next president has to be prepared to use power and then to restrain their use of power to defang the American presidency. So this can never happen again. And so there's three kind of fundamental things that the next president has to be able to talk about in a straight way to the American people. Right? Democratic Party has to embrace ethics reform comprehensively. The stock trading, the insider trading, Nancy Pelosi becoming a billionaire as the Speaker of the House. No. And the fandom, the two warring tribes, my side does it, it's okay. Enough. Right? There's at least some of us who will stand up a third party. Right? And if we ought to commit suicide together, we'll go down fighting for some virtue and some normalcy and some decency so that there's a record of it at least before we go into the good night. Democratic Party's got to be the ethical party. The governor of Denmark just said everyone in the country has a copyright on their face and on their voice in the coming AI age. Great idea. We need a genetic bill of rights. We need privacy, data protections. There has to be a breaking up of power, the power of the presidency, the power of the executive, the power of big tech, the power of big app, the power of the big corporations, and we see how feckless they all are, right? We have to smash the Gilded Age, the vulgarity that we saw at this Bezos wedding.
Mm.
We all know what the Democratic Party has to stand for, and then it has to be a prosperity party, not a scarcity party. And it has to embrace Americanism, or Americanism will reject it. Has to be an American party. And so that party has to be defiant. It has to be tough. It has to be strong. It has to be resolute. And it's got to be very focused on the core issues. And the core issues are the vast abuses. And those abuses are human rights abuses. So the next president, day one, I'm not joking. Pretend I'm the president. I'll order the Air Force to seize that Qatari 747 and I would drop it into the Atlantic Ocean off of Mar-a-Lago and declare it under the Antiquities Act a national park and a coral reef. All right. An executive order, and the MAGAs should understand that they will live by the sword, they shall die by the sword. So a executive order and a pair of handcuffs transfers Tom Holman to the custody of the International Criminal Court.
I think people are warming up to the idea of Steve Schmidt for president right now.
And so there will be a moment. Special Agent X, Agent so-and-so, did you wear a mask? And while wearing a mask, participate in any abduction raids that you were told were lawful? Please leave your weapon and your badge on the table outside. Right? These agencies will be broken up. This will be set right. And so Donald Trump produces a television show that he puts into a funnel and it comes through that chute at the American people like a bullet every day. And it's not real.
Mhm.
He is not the boss of all things, controlling all things. You can go down the street and you can see normalcy and you can find it. But the chill is real. The fear is real. The collapse of dissent is real. The collapse of judgment is real. The collapse of wisdom is real. The incompetence in these agencies is real. And the deadliness of power and incompetence together is well known to anybody who knows anything about history. So it's a frightening time as we get ready to enter into this 250th anniversary year of the birth of the country. And one of the things that I'd urge everybody to do is to read a tremendous speech about the 4th of July and to appreciate that patriotism, some of our greatest patriots have been our greatest dissidents. And one of the great speeches by a dissident that we can appreciate now as patriotic is Frederick Douglass in 1852, who poses the question, what does the 4th of July mean to a slave? And there are really three parts to that speech. And it is in the beginning part where we can all agree with Frederick Douglass about the genius of the people who founded the country. And we can agree about their bravery and about their principle. But then Frederick Douglass says something that is important because I talk about history a lot, but he says, I'm not here to talk about history. I'm here to talk about the present. And he talks about the present and he gets to the end and he makes a statement of faith in an outcome that's going to get much worse in 5 years' time with the Dred Scott decision that the Supreme Court puts out. So we read this Frederick Douglass speech. I'll just conclude, I guess, with this story and just wrap up the Frederick Douglass piece. Is that 5 years later, when that Supreme Court decision comes down, the Dred Scott decision, Frederick Douglass is in a place of depression, and Sojourner Truth, the great abolitionist, says to him, Frederick, is God dead? And Douglass was a very faithful, very devout man, and he realized immediately that his depression really was a form of idolatry that was brought on because he had put his faith in the institutions of man, in the Supreme Court. And he recognized immediately that he needed to go out and talk about this revelation. And so he goes out and he talks about the Dred Scott decision, and he decries it. It's injustice, it's evil. And in the end, he says to the audience, but maybe, just maybe, in a way that we can't see, that this terrible decision has set in motion a chain of events, and that this terrible thing was a necessitous link in that chain that will bring about the downfall of the whole rotten institution. And so 5 years after Douglas gives that speech, the situation worsens and he despairs and finds hope and is proven right that the necessitous link leads to the downfall of the entire enterprise within 7 years' time after that. And so we have to appreciate in America that there have been many, many, many long periods of injustice and inequality that have been faced down with courage. And after decades of pushing, sometimes, then the rock moves and justice gets closer. And that is why King is correct when he says the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And so when you're traveling on that arc, sometimes you live in a period at that bend where change happens rapidly. And you think sometimes, as people did who are close to our age at the millennia, that we're at the end of history, as opposed to just a long, flat, steady line on that arc, but it's going to bend again. And bend it has, and we have to make sure that it bends in the direction that it has bent for 250 years.
Mhm. Steve, great place to end off our chat today. As always, I don't think a lot of people understand that if you want to learn from about where you're at, you got to talk to the dead. The purpose of reading, the purpose of history is to learn from it. It's not to run from it. And if you look at life and society and democracy through a historic lens in North America, specifically in that beautiful country of America, and it is still a beautiful country. It is. You can look at it like it's an empire in decline or under construction. And for us to end there, where the opportunity exists in this darkness, as Frederick Douglass and your story about Frederick Douglass rings so true to me today, is that chaos is a ladder depending on how you look at that chaos. And being able to kind of walk through what's going on in the United States with you today, and to end on a note where, hey, it's trite, but it's always darkest before the dawn. America, Canada, societies have always gone through evolutions where democracy was challenged, and it needed to be challenged because it needed to get better for the people. And I hope that happens. I hope that the bright light of hopefully New York's next mayor, Zohan Mamdani, is a lesson for the Democratic Party to do just what you're talking about, which is take advantage of the chaos and become a real party for real people. Get rid of that corporate attitude. Get rid of the things that you know hurt people. Get rid of people like Nancy Pelosi, who became a billionaire on a public servant salary. Get rid of the old and bring in the new. And there is the opportunity, as always. Great to see you, Steve. Maybe we can catch that baseball game in the next couple of days. It's supposed to be nice. All right, pal.
Okay, see ya.
Take care. Steve Schmidt, The Warning. Go and subscribe to Steve right now. I mean, no one does a better job of trying to bring you into the light. Nobody does a better job of tying history into what we're going through now. And you don't learn from history unless you know history. And history would dictate that the people always win, depending on where you are. And if you are an American, you are American. As a Canadian, I can tell you this: I haven't seen you lose much. Donald Trump just can't stop losing. He's like a freight train of Loserville. So go win. Really appreciate y'all spending some time with us today. As always, you can go to my Substack and subscribe, deanblundell.substack.com. Because it is Canada Day week here in Canada, and because I love my American and Canadian friends, and we like to stand up for democracy on both sides of the border, we've got 50% off annual subscriptions for life. Love for you to join us. Unlimited access, free or paid, doesn't matter. Your support of people like Steve, like myself, and other people who are looking for the truth, tell the truth, and fact check for you, even though we ask you to fact check us at the same time. Is onefold. That's to stand up for democracy, stand up for human decency, the right thing. It's what we try to do here. It's what we try to do all the time. It's what we try to do with our friends like Lev Parnas, Michael Cohen, Steve Schmidt, on and on and on. Back at 3:00 for a podcast with Zev, the 5-Stack Live. We'll go over the 5 biggest stories of the day. I imagine we'll cover some of this as well. But truly, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. As always, time is a capital that is always diminishing, not like money. So you can take my money, just don't take my time. So thank you so much for spending some time with us. Have a great day. And from Canada, we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.